part of the beginning of the civil rights movement. So let's move forward to our next slide. So today I want to talk about the main themes of this book, and that's grief, prejudice, and healing. And also, Emmett Till. I really want to focus on how the events in the book, how reality versus fiction, like what she wrote in the book and what the characters are feeling and what they're going through versus the things that are going on today, what we're experiencing. And I want to know what, you guys feel. It's very important that we communicate, how we feel today. It's okay to watch a movie, about what happened in the past. It's okay to read a book, and relate to the characters, but it's very important to also share, how we're feeling today. Um, these next 25 chapters are really significant because it gets to, in the first part of the review, the book club, we talked mostly about the characters, but this time I really want us to focus on the situations surrounding those characters. We're dealing with three major families: the Cox family, the Penishep family, and the I want to say Till, the Todd family. And so we want to really talk, when we're answering these questions, we want to talk about all three of these families. And then I want to also find out how you guys feel about these situations in real life, in reality. So the first question: what is the significance of the singing slaves to each of the characters, both black and white? So let's start with Kennedy. Do you want to kind of?
So for me, the singing slaves, it's a tradition that most people seem to take part in, especially during slave times. And it was a way to maybe even soothe themselves. But what I found really interesting was how Lily missed the singing slaves, and how when she moved away to another location with her daughter, she thought about the singing slaves a lot. So I really don't know what the significance was for Lily, but I thought it was interesting that she connected to that and loved hearing that, or it was a part of her background noise while she was, cooking or feeding the baby, whatever she was doing. But she missed hearing that. And so I thought that was interesting, that she missed it.
Absolutely. Sandra or Kate, Avery, welcome.
Thank you.
Would any of you like to elaborate on what you think the significance of the slave songs held for those characters?
I I thought that, well, singing is soothing, right? In general, I mean, obviously, especially that type of singing. And I thought that maybe Lily missed it because when that was happening, it was when her life supposedly was before the event had happened. Therefore, she had her house, she had her husband brought money, she, she was not seen as this bad person that she became to the town. So maybe it could be that that singing reminded her of the past before all the events had happened, when things were in her world, better for her, not for anybody else. So
Mhm.
that's what I thought it could be.
Okay, that's a nice perspective.
Great point.
Kate or Avery?
Well, this is so interesting for me because I think, Cheryl, you said something the last time we met that made me look at the book and realize that, excuse me, that it opens and closes with the singing, which I had not realized before then. And so it's really a full circle, I think, that the author has drawn for us. And the opening is Lily, lying there and describing the singing, the way it nourishes her soul. But she also uses language about that sort of evokes violence and blood, and something about blood seeping into the soil, which sort of is a prelude to what's to come. We don't know it yet. And so I think she's foreshadowing. But then it ends with Wydell taking WT back to Mississippi. And it's like that moment that it almost makes me kind of get choked up, where he says, this is where you come from, this is your land, and from your grandparents on both sides. And they used to work in the cotton fields until their fingers bled, but the music would help them overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then WT says, Dad, what did you used to sing? And it ends with that. And I felt like, oh, he broke through, like he got through to his son. There's hope. And it just sort of leaves you hanging in the balance there at the end of the book. And it felt like Lily maybe had the music in the beginning and it helped her cope, but it felt delivered back to the descendants of the people who sang it by the end of the book. And it was just really powerful for me when I went back and realized that.
And did you notice that in the end of the book, he says that he wants to have a drink? He says, I need a drink. He's like, I'm back here and all of these, old emotions are coming up. And he's like, I have stopped drinking, but I want to go get a drink. And that's when his son grabs his wrist and said, what did you used to sing? Because that's what got him through. So don't drink. Don't go back to that bad behavior. Sing that song. Sing that song, that thing that helped you. Lean on that. And that was just very, that was so much to me.
So let me chime in on that moment where what got you through. And I think, Cheryl, you make a valid and very significant point, especially with respect to what we call slave songs. And the reason why I mentioned that those songs were not just songs of religion, expressing religiosity or expressing a moment of melancholia, but actually a lot of the slave songs were actually hidden messages. And they were, and in those messages, it actually told the slaves something that was very relevant, maybe to that particular time. They may be hearing in the fields them singing, steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. I ain't got long to stay here. Now, to the slave masters and everybody else listening, they're just singing a religious song. But the true listener, the slave was hearing, it's time to go. That we're gonna steal away. So, and it's not just that song, but plenty of the songs carried sort of this duality and
messages.
Yes, and so I think that this is probably inherent. Like, sing that song and bring something more to you in your life than just the words or the melody, but what's in between those things.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is that's why I love reading. And I love the fact that we can, share what a book, we all have all these individual perspectives. And that's what I love about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we have these different perspectives and we read something and we listen to something and it has this one meaning. But if we all come together and we have a discussion, then we grow. And so I love that. That's wonderful. Anything else that anyone wants to add about this question right here? Okay, so before we go to the next one, the theme that I wanted to carry through with this discussion is fiction versus reality. So let's talk about real life situations today. What do you think a modern slave song is?
Well, I mean, it depends on your approach to it. I mean, any song that sort of Donny Hathaway has this great song, "A Song for You," where he talks about, it's not my words, it's not my melody, but what's inherent in there, the love that I'm trying to express through this particular song, and it may not be in the melody, it may not be in the words, and so any, I think, song that rises above its surface meaning, or what appears to be a superficial. I'm not. I wouldn't, because I don't want to denigrate it that way, but to say, but it's more than what is in the words, but what is built in the melody. If there's something built in it, I think that can be sort of a, to use the term, a modern slave song per se. And I don't want to say slave is pejorative and when it comes to music that way, but just say our early gospel music, because gospel means good news, so this was, they were carrying a news. So any song that carries news and to you in some way or another. Blues is another form of storytelling. Country music. There's a great song that came out in 2011. I drive your truck. Right? If you know that song, and this is a testament of a father mourning the loss of his son, and he's saying that, I still drive your truck. That was my son's truck I drove, and an incredibly popular song. So, I would say that has and so any message carrying song like that has a certain relevancy to what we would call slave songs.
Now, what I was more leaning towards when I said like a modern slave song, I was thinking of things that bring us comfort and things that have those hidden messages today that we get, that somebody else might not get. So for Lily, it was, it reminded her of her past. And I think, social media plays a little role in that modern slave song, and how you can be on certain sites and you can be in certain groups and you might not actually be discussing what is really going on, but maybe the presence of certain individuals, and just that, just like we're here today, this gives me encouragement. I've experienced racism on jobs. I've experienced marginalization, and I'm not gonna, I might not be able to actually verbalize everything that I've gone through, but gathering like this and this type of platform gives me a sense of strength to carry on. And it makes me appreciate, I have this group. I have you guys as allies. And we aren't discussing my particular situation, but you are helping me carry on. So things like that. That's the kind of thing I was thinking about when I, thought about the song, and I thought about fiction versus reality, the past versus the present. Anyone else?
Well, I love that. And I'm going with, definitely have to be present, because you didn't give us the questions in advance. So
No.
I love that. Just so anybody listening knows. And so I'll just go with what popped into my head is Kesha had a song called Praying a couple of years back. And it had sort of like low, slow parts, and it would rise and have a chorus. And she turned pain from her life, from an abusive relationship, into this song of forgiveness. And it sort of had that feel of everybody in the place listening, singing along when that chorus hits. And so that's what came to mind for me.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go to the next question. What do you think of Wydell Sr. and Delotha's expectations of him as a husband and father?
So I'll jump into this one because Delotha was not my favorite character. Although I know that many people do have a lot of sympathy for Delotha. But I just felt she had unrealistic expectations of her mom by sending her there, and she just needed a break. And we don't get breaks as parents normally. And, she just kind of sent him there. And not that nothing is her fault, but just that she just felt she can get herself together. Secondly, her inability to really see Wydell for who he was and what she was doing is another problem for me. And then also, I did not like how she replaced her son, Armstrong, with another baby, and everyone in the family knew it because she called the baby by a different name and just a lot of things. And so she was delusional to me for most of the book, and therefore not really qualified to have expectations of others.
I love that. Anyone else? So for me, Duluth is not my favorite character, but I do have a little bit more empathy for her. But Wydell, and I think I don't know a nice way to say this. I think that he was kind of weak, from the very beginning. And she just kind of manipulated him and, did what she wanted to do with him. And he basically followed suit. And I felt that that was pretty much because of, his upbringing. And, for me, I sometimes think that our situations make us who we are, and we have to work hard sometimes to change our perspective and to be someone different. So I love the way that Wydell kind of progressed, and he went from this toy to, and this up and down, depending on where, Delotho, what she was doing with him, to actually taking the initiative to save his son and to say, okay, look, let me go get him. I feel like he got to a point where he recognized, if I don't do something, I'm going to have another dead son. If I don't, it's my responsibility as a father, as a man, to at least, establish some roots with his son so that he can, understand. And I do, with my life coaching, I do a lot of inner child work with people and trying to understand why we do the things that we do, why we behave the way that we behave. And so I think that, I give kudos to Wydell in the end because he did break through. I think Sandra, you said that, about, or Kate, you said that about the end, how he broke through in the end. He did break through. And his son was able to get it. Like, what's that song you used to sing? And now, this kid who was in all of this trouble and on this, wrong path, this short little journey is turning both of their lives around. And so I thought, he may not have lived up to her expectations. And I think, I agree with you, Kennedy, when you say maybe her expectations were unrealistic. But him going from his journey of manhood, that's why I have that image there on the screen. I think he made it in the end. And I was really kind of proud of him. Anyone else?
Well, sure. Delotha, I forget the question when we first read the book, but it was, maybe she was the most compelling character to me. Just there's something about, I am a mother, and just I can't even wrap my mind around the pain and the anguish and what she was, living through. And so that I saw that motivated everything for both of them, and they entered this very dysfunctional relationship, but it was born out of that pain for both of them. They're the only two that shared that. And partly where I think maybe she went astray is that her expectations were all about resolving her pain. What could he do to help her with her pain? But I don't think she was looking at
his pain.
How do I help him with his pain? Yes. And that led to so many of the, issues that they encountered.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I also feel like, Wydell was abandoned the family, right? Wydell abandoned her and the son. And so I'm not trying to defend the Loda for taking the son over the summer to grandma's, but she's a single mom raising a child because Whitell disappeared and became a drunk person. And so uh, I feel like she did use him in terms of getting him to come back to, maybe like Kate is saying, to to suit the pain, to maybe replace his child with a different one. But ultimately, they both were um, kind of people that were broken. She broke after the child died, and Wydell was broken before. And
Right.
so I can't blame her too much, because maybe the consequence, maybe that would have never happened if the father was around, because then he could have been helping educate, the child. And then
Right.
parenting is difficult enough, and being a single parent is very hard. So I'm
Yes.
not trying to excuse her, but I'm just saying that he was a person that didn't have it together, and then at one point the Lord does save him and gets him out of the spot so in a way he has to be kind of thankful to her too, because she's the one that was strong and did what she did for her son. She's the one that saved the money and then used it for a very good cause to have a business. I mean, there was a lot of good things that she did, but because, like Kate saying, I think parents, when they lose a child, the history says how much, they don't really get over it ever. And so I think a lot of her behavior was that she was never able to get over that pain. Um,
Wow.
so not trying to excuse you, but it's complicated, the relationship they had, and he wasn't necessarily a responsible man. So,
And that's funny now that you say that. I'm wondering, I had a different thought. I'm thinking, do you think that she put so much on him because she felt like he was partly responsible for her pain? Never know. So, but that's an interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I'm gonna go back and read a few more sections of that and see, because like sometimes we do, if somebody does something to us and it causes another event, we might
yeah,
blame them for that. So,
yeah.
is it that he, by him leaving in the beginning, she actually blamed him for her son's death, and so now you're going to give me another son.
Right, right.
It's your fault. I've lost my son, and so I want another one. Because it's crazy, and grief is one of our themes. Grief is unpredictable
Hmm.
and not textbook at all. We all grieve very differently, and we not only do we grieve differently as individuals, we grieve different situations differently. We grieve different people differently.
Hmm.
And I say that, from unfortunately from a lot of experience. I've lost both parents, a brother, a sister, a niece, and the grief for each of them is very different. Um, Something interesting that a psychologist told me, he said that it's compounded grief because grief is an incurable disease.
Mm.
He said it does not go away. So every time there's another incident, and you have, then that grief is compounded and it builds. And so that's, another reason why, you grieve. Somebody might think, oh, you're being a little extreme or you're being that. But it's not just death that we grieve relationships, we grieve situations. So that's so interesting. Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing that.
So actually, now I
Now
feel,
I'm a new perspective.
I know, I don't feel as bad about the loaf after you said that, Sandra. So
Sorry.
I'm gonna roll my judgment back, because it is true. It's also likely that she was already in pain because of a failed relationship,
Yes.
and there was this whole thing that Blair Underwood and some others did a while, called Sister I'm Sorry, because people were really unable to have healthy relationships based on past hurts. And the fact that she made a decision like that because she did feel alone, and overwhelmed. When my husband goes out of town, I'm just like, look, I need you to get back, because it's a lot when you're trying to manage your children's lives, and then your life in order to support this whole thing. And so I have now a little more sympathy for Gloria.
Yay, Sandra! Avery, do you have any thoughts on this?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just kidding. I mean,
I'm gonna let you slide.
no, I'm good on this one. All right, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, what is the significance of Ida and Clayton's relationship in comparison to the race relations in Hopewell? Anyone?
Well, I'll just say, I don't know if Kate or Sandra might remember, but Clayton is probably my favorite character, only because he's so complicated. And to your point that you made on the last one, Cheryl, why he's left out of the audio version, I have no idea, because for me, he's very central to the story. But I found, Clayton's relationship with Ida was a good relationship, and this person who's trying to be good, but he represents the part where even people who are sensitive to marginalized communities, they have a limit. And when it came to sharing his family's money, he rolled that back, but at first it was a very hard no, and did not want to share. And I thought, though, this wasn't represented in the book, but I would think that he would break down a little bit about how his father just did not want him to be with, what was the girl's name?
Marguerite.
And yet he had a love relationship, obviously with a Black woman. And so just how hypocritical his father had been, and how that probably would have affected him. But so two things: the hypocritical nature of his father, as well as the fact that he had, even as sympathetic as he was, he did have a limit.
Okay, I want to read a section of the book because I want to talk about those relationships. So it says, this is Marguerite. Marguerite was deserving of respect, even if she had been a white man's whore for more years than they could remember. Why she'd come out better than a lot of white wives. So that's like after she had, left and was going to college. This was the gossip. This is what the people were saying in the town, that she had been a white man's whore. So I think that's interesting, because you're saying that, and I struggled with that part, and I think that's why I highlighted it. And I'm like, well, why would they call her a whore? That was his, he loved her because he was sad when she left. But did he love her? Did he love her?
Or did he did love her?
But did he? Because love should be more, and you should be able to sacrifice more for love. And so did he love her, or did he desire her? Did he? Of course, I think he cared about her, but did he really love her?
Well, we talked about this in the last call. He could only go so far, based on his family influence.
So is that love?
Well, listen, if my daughter comes home with somebody I don't like, I really don't care how she feels about it. If she needs to give it up, then that's the kind of pressure I'm going to put on her. And currently, our relationship stands where she probably would listen. I have no idea what's actually going to happen, but I am saying that I am hoping that my parental influence can help her decide. Now, even though Clayton's father's reasons were certainly not honorable for why he couldn't be with her, but it's still his father, his father's influence. And I know that counts for something. I hope that counts for something for me.
I must be a hopeless romantic, Because I feel that, if you love someone, then you love them. And there's nothing that's gonna, I mean, you deal with the consequences. And I don't money is he's educated. There's other ways to make money. I mean, so I know we did this with the last book. I just don't I hate Clayton for that.
Go ahead, Sandra.
It's funny because Cheryl, Clayton was my least favorite character in the book. I had a, I had, I will hate him because he tries so much to help, but he didn't do enough for me. So to me, I was very frustrated with him throughout because, like you said, the example of did he love Margaret or not, the how much he was willing to do for Ida, but he didn't do more. How much was he willing to confront the father, but he didn't do enough. To me, he never did enough to jeopardize his future, and that drove me crazy. He never put himself second or third. He was always first because he always wanted to protect his future, which was the money, and with the money became the father. And so he never went, you know, he never really was a man to me because if you really believe something, you stand up, like you said, either it's for love or for saying I don't like the way you treat, all these people, and I'm gonna stand up for it and go against all you people. He never did. He never really did.
Yeah,
That's why.
he's weak. He's the weakest link. He does not stand up for either of the women, Marguerite or Ida.
Ida.
And he does not stand up for himself.
Mhm.
He betrays his own belief system. And for what? I mean, if you're going to betray your belief system for money, then I mean, money is what you believe in. That's your true north is
Yeah.
money. Not love, not dignity, not integrity.
Or justice.
Right.
Well,
Anyone
he didn't see Zalotha or her mom or the whole thing as wholly human. And while I could hold him responsible for that, I really do, when we talk about this racism thing, it is the air we're all breathing. And looking at the status of the whole family in the town, I can just imagine how he was conditioned to be certain ways. And so when he went to try to give Delota some money to get the body back to Chicago, he said he was surprised that she would start crying. He didn't expect tears. Now, I don't know what else you can expect when you lose a child, but to me, that said how not wholly human people were to him, Black people specifically. And that's kind of why it's just the whole complicated nature. And it's a barrier for me for people who have to get over that in order to be right, be more bold, be courageous, be brave, be a true ally. But they have to climb, to me, a heavy hill in order to get there. As a minority, I can say that because I'm on the other side, but I have to have some empathy for the hill they have to climb in order to get to the side where he could have been all those things we think he should have.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, I'm starting to feel better about Clayton.
I don't know if she's selling me on Clayton yet or not. But
I mean, where are you guys at?
An interesting point of view. I just feel that if you love someone,
we heard that, Cheryl.
Well, okay, I have two thoughts on that. So one on the if you love someone, I felt that with Marguerite, like there's a note of fetishism there, perhaps for me, because we talk about who cared for him when he was young, and it was Black women, and that's who he's so drawn to, and I think that that Bebe Moore Campbell, she very, I don't know, she writes that so well. She just lets you see it. She doesn't throw it in your face, you know? And so, but then who am I to judge someone's fetishes? And if that makes them happy and that's love, then for them, then that's love for them. So that's sort of where I sit with that.
Okay.
You know, and then, but he doesn't seem to have awareness of that. So, you know,
But she does.
But she does.
Page 318, she says, you always do the easiest thing for you so you can keep on living and not feel guilty. You're weak, but I'm not. I love you, but I have the strength to leave you, Clayton, and that's just what I'm going to do.
Love it. I love it. And you know, because that leads into, thank you for that, because it leads into what I was going to say, maybe more about Ida, but really it's about Marguerite too, which is, you know, Clayton represents sort of like in the power structure, he's like the benign to well-meaning leading edge. And if you're on the side without power, it may be highly imperfect, but that's all you've got. If you're going to get a toehold and start to make progress, you've got to get the Claytons. And so she figured out how to do that in her Marguerite way. And I think Ida figured out how to do it in her Ida way.
Absolutely.
I love that about both of them.
So let's talk about how those relationships in comparison to the race relations in Hopewell. What do you think about that? Like how they developed versus how the race relations developed in the town itself.
Oh my. I mean, I guess if I continue with that, it's at least I see some progress over time. You know, Clayton isn't his father. Yes, he's so flawed, and yes, he's imperfect, and he's weak, and he's ultimately looking out for what, you know, preserves his power and money. But he's willing to help. You know, he goes to Delotha right after Armstrong is killed, and then, you know, we see how I thought cleverly Ida comes to him after he helps. Now I forget her. Was it Sweet Babe, her son? Mm-hmm. And then says, and there are other children, you could help them. And she talks him into it. And
feeds his ego.
Figures out, like, let me manipulate this a little bit. Yeah. You know, I don't have the power, but I'm scrappy and I'm clever. And she makes it work. And to me, it represented, hopefully, you know, sort of progress in that place towards imperfect progress, but progress.
Yeah, I definitely feel there was progress just by what's Lily's daughter, Doreen, her behavior.
Yes.
Shows progress in the town itself, I think.
And I think, and I think progress is also represented just by the discovery of, you know, who Ida's dad really is. And what I mean by that is that, you know, that as soon as we all come together and recognize that we all sort of are all blended and we all come from common threads in so many ways, I think that we start to understand the basis of who we are is not of the color of our skin, but it's our humanity. Mm-hmm. And this whole notion of, you know, of the discovery, this plot discovery of who my dad really is really an old notion. I mean, it goes back to there's a 1920 film called Within Our Gates, where this woman is being raped by this white man, and this black woman discovers in the midst of this rape that the guy that's raping her is her father, and they don't recognize this until that moment. So this whole sense of discovery of who we are, where we come from, what our lineage is, and how we're all connected is, you know, it's a pretty well used trope in literature and movies and so forth. But I think it's very powerful because it is representative of progress, and that's the word that you all use. And progress because we are become more aware of who we are as people. And that's one of the things I loved about that.
I like that. You know, Kennedy and I were talking earlier today about that, you know, how, you know, slave women were raped. And so that's how, you know, there's light-skinned black people, dark skinned black people. And then those daughters were raped by those same men. And it's a lot of that. And I don't think everyone realizes just how much of that, is still, you know, prevalent and relevant.
Yeah.
It's there, and we do have to discuss it because that's part of the humanity in all of us. And that, I mean, that was a wonderful point, Avery, that it's our humanity, and more than likely we're all of us are probably related in some shape, form, or fashion, because there were plenty of very fair skinned black people who passed, and and you wouldn't know they married other or white people, or they married other ones that were passing, and they carried on as white people, and so you would not know. And until so there is this thing where you want to find out who you are and where you're from. And I mean, look at, you can 23 and Me and all of these different things now that are out because people want to know.
Right.
But it is our humanity. It's the humanity that counts. And I love that. Anyone else on this question? Okay, next question. So, this novel imitates the events surrounding the murder of Emmett Till. And we were able to watch a little clip from the movie earlier. What are the differences and similarities of Delotha and what you know about Mamie Till Mobley following the murder of their sons? We kind of touched on this with some of the other questions, but I really want us to think about fiction versus reality, and the mothers and what they experienced. I'm going to start this one out because there's one thing that I really want to point out is that Mamie Till Mobley did not try to replace her son. She didn't have another son. And it reminded me of my daughter when she was little. She had a hamster, and the hamster died. And I said, "Oh, baby, mommy will get you another hamster." And she's, "Oh, mommy, could you just get yourself another Leah if I died?" And
Mm.
I was like, and she said, "That was my baby. You can't replace my baby, mommy." And I'm like, it was eye-opening to me because I'm like, it's a hamster. I'll go get you another one. But she felt all of this, deep passion for this hamster. She's like, you can't replace it. She never wanted another hamster. And so I thought about that in comparison to what's happened here in, the novel, how she went and she's like, okay, I'm going to have another son. I want another son. And I don't know that in reality that would be a thing. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there, along with other things that you guys might think differences and similarities.
Well, I went to the African American Museum in Washington, D.C.,
Ah,
and they have a special exhibit with real photographs and articles and everything about Emmett Till. And there was a line, I remember it was interesting because there was the only line that you had to do to enter this area, and they would let you just spend some time and then you had to keep moving. And what's interesting is that I was reading the book right when I was at the exhibit. And one thing that to me was shocking is that the imagination, right? My imagination got to a certain point of how badly they had beat up Armstrong, and how this mom wanted to have the open casket. But the photograph of the real Emmett was horrifying.
Yes.
So it's interesting how my my brain didn't even go there, or I could even go there, right? Because I had maybe a lucky upbringing that I haven't been exposed either in a country where there's tons of bombs, or where you see things that are very traumatic. And it was interesting that the reality of it was so much worse than what I had put in my head from reading what the writer had you know made
Absolutely.
us think. So that was very kind of brutal to me and
Yeah.
a lot more harsh. The book didn't. Usually it's the other way around, but the reality was a lot worse than the book. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sandra, was there a line? Maybe I didn't understand that you had to read
No,
before
no,
you.
no. Sorry, there was
Oh,
in order to end this exhibit was closed, and you had to. There was a lot of people in line
a
wanting
line
to.
of people. Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it was the museum was packed, but it was interesting. This part, you it was a separate line if you wanted to see this exhibit. Yeah, yeah,
Now I've been there, and for me, it was aligned when I was there too. But it felt like a funeral to me.
yeah. That's true.
And I feel that they designed it that way because they have his actual casket is there. And I feel that they designed it like you're standing in line at this funeral procession,
Mm.
waiting to see this. And you don't know what it's going to be like, and your imagination can't even go there until you actually see it. So
That's so interesting. It's true. You now that you bring it up, it's exactly how he felt.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I felt that too. The sounds of Mamie wailing that they played in the museum was hard, right, to listen to, but it did a great job of making you feel like you were attending the funeral.
hmm
And I could see why this event started the civil rights movement because, and in that clip for Emmett Till, when she says, if something happens to one of us, it should be the concern of everyone. And it literally launched an entire movement. And so I think that seeing the exhibit, it should, is primary if you are ever in Washington, D.C. It is
Yeah.
the whole exhibit, including this one as well, within the museum. But I think going to the Smithsonian there is an incredible thing.
absolutely.
I think that Mamie Till's decision to say keep the casket open and allow the world to see uh, this what the brutality that happened to her son represents a certain power or strength that is not only admirable but fascinating in a way, because where you think that you just want to be mired into the mourning of the death of your child, they use that as an example to elevate the world in some way or another. Same way Delotha wanting to say, I want to bring my son, to bring Armstrong's body back, says that I'm just not going to be mired in the death of this boy, but I'm going to somehow use his death to elevate us to become better people by seeing the tragedy. This thing hits me home close because a few years ago, my nephew was killed on the streets of Chicago at age 18. And when I came to pick my mother up for the funeral, my mother was wearing army fatigues. Now, my mother has never been in the military, but she explained during the funeral that she was wearing fatigues to demonstrate or dramatize the fact that there's a war going on, that mothers have to fight for their children, and we have to fight for their lives. And so she wasn't going to wear dark mourning clothes, but rather something to illustrate the fight. So I
Wow.
think in this book, Delotha is illustrating the fight. Mamie Till Mobley illustrates the fight, and it is a resonant power that I have seen, in from women in real life and in fiction here, and it always resonates strong with me.
Wow.
Whew, thank you for
That is
sharing
so
that.
strong.
Thank you for sharing that. I can't even I can't even imagine, you know, um like I said, I went through a situation at a job,
Mhm.
and the fight, it just like, I was like, what am I doing?
Mhm.
It's so easy to quit.
Come on now.
So easy to quit. And when you don't quit, it's not because of you. When you don't quit, you're thinking of the people that come after you.
Yep.
You're thinking of other Black girls. You're thinking of other Black boys. You're thinking of their friends. You're thinking of your neighbors. You're not thinking of you. Because if you were thinking of you go to bed. You'd be like, you'd be like Waddell at the end of the story. I need a drink. I need, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do this because it's painful. It's painful to be strong. It's painful to stand up. This work that we're doing, um, as educating diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not easy. Being an ally is not easy. It's not. But you have to be here for it, not for yourself, but for the betterment of mankind. And, Martin Luther King lost his life. And when I think about Martin Luther King, I think about his wife. And I'd have been like, no, you can't go out there anymore. I need you. I need you here. You were talking about you calling your husband, Kennedy. I need you here with these kids. Can you imagine
Yeah.
these fights? And we owe it to our ancestors, and we owe it to our future generations to educate, to fight, to not give up. So the issues: inequality, we've talked about that, race, gender, class, and injustice. Those are the issues that are in this book, that this book covers, along with the ones that I mentioned earlier: grief, prejudice, and healing. Let's not forget healing, because in the end, there was healing.
Mhm.
And we're still working towards that healing. There's so much going on. I wanted to focus on the fiction versus the reality. There's so much going on in the world today, where we wonder how far we've gotten with this fight. We're still working towards that healing. And just you saying with your mother and the fatigues, it's a war. We need to continue to fight, and we need to look for that healing, one battle at a time. So, is there anything that any of you would like to discuss as far as these 5 issues?
So whatever it is, it will be our final comments. We're right at an hour. But for me, this is a great platform to discuss all of these issues and to really extrapolate them from the book to real life and have some real healing, like you're saying, around that. There's a reason why we talk about it and it's uncomfortable, but it's only to get to a better place. And for me, there's so many and such rich content that this is my favorite book now of all time. So I don't know how we're going to move on to another book, but I guess we will.
Yes, I have a couple thoughts about the next book. Maybe you guys can chime in. There's one book called How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent. And there's another, The Bluest Eye.
Oh,
I think
Toni
they,
Morrison. Yeah.
yes, I think both of those books deal with race relations in the United States today, and growth. So any of those would be great ideas. If you guys have any ideas, please let me know.
Any last words, guys? Avery?
No, I just vote for The Bluest Eye if that's your next one. I'm a big Toni Morrison fan. I haven't read it in many, many years, and it would give me an excuse to pick it up.
Awesome.
you guys
I
hear
just
me?
What'd you say?
I was just going to say I wanted to thank each of you because I learned so much and got so much, and I feel energized and optimistic just leaving this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
The same as Kate.
Yes, thank you. You guys offer so much. I love to chat anyway, but when it's something when it's something of this important and you leave, like you said, energized, it's always a good thing. Your mute button is on, Kennedy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Cheryl, for leading this conversation. It's been a pleasure. Kate, thanks for coming to both of the conversations, and Sandra, thanks for joining today, and as well as Avery. This conversation was richer because of your comments and the way a book club should run. So hopefully this inspires other people to get into book clubs, join our next one this winter, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.